What's up? Welcome into today's episode of Pushing the Pile. On today's show, we are going to wrap up our tiers list. We did every single position group already.
Of tiers.
Now we're doing coaching staffs, but we're going to do it a little bit differently on today's show. We've been doing A through F. To me, it just didn't make sense to do coaching tiers A through F. They're too, I guess, like fluid. There's something about just assigning like a whole coaching staff, like a D, that just didn't sit right with me. And I know it's not going to sit right with fans. So we're going to do it a little bit different. We'll see.
I don't think people realize how many people are on a staff.
That's the thing.
The ones that people always talk about are OC and DC and head coach, right? Those are the holy triumvirate, the trinity, as it were, at the top of the coaching staff. But there are dozens of staff members that put their fingerprints on the success or failures of a team day in, day out, whether it's in practice or in the meeting room, whether they fail or succeed in getting the scheme or the messaging through, the technique, which is very important in the NFL. Some coaches have it, some coaches don't. There's haves and have-nots from top to bottom on every staff. There may be a top-tier head coach who has real shit position coaches or people that, it just doesn't work. So I'm interested to hear what you think, because I have some very strong opinions about this head coaching and staff rankings.
Yeah, I will say this one was probably the most difficult of any of the exercises to do. And so you'll see the categories when I get to them. I gave myself some leeway in terms of how I ended up separating them out. But first off the ball segment, we had some big contract extensions in New York. That vaunted 2022 draft class from the Jets: Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson. Sauce gets 4 years, 120. Garrett Wilson gets 4 years, 130. You see right there the wide receiver cornerback, that Travis Hunter debate. The Travis Hunter sort of which position should he play? Well, you saw it play out right there, because I think no one is saying Garrett Wilson is as good a wide receiver as Sauce Gardner is a cornerback. But obviously he gets more money due to the position he played. But for the Jets, this was just like, this is what you do when you have top 10 picks, the play they do. When you hit on a top 10 pick, you reward it. That's how you build a team. That is just like strong long-term team building strategy to me. So kudos to the Jets is my takeaway from this.
Yeah, kudos to the Jets. And so often we see with these teams that go through quarrels and, trials and tribulations like the Jets have, a lot of their young superstars, unfortunately for themselves, they faded to obscurity. And you have to be on good teams in order to be playing meaningful football. They haven't had that in New York, but they've had these two young men that have stepped up to the plate and balled out. Garrett Wilson was the one that I had concerns about potentially him getting out of town at the first opportunity. But to get him locked up like this is great for the Jets. And obviously, new regime in there. You want to show that you reward guys who have played the game the right way, which is what Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson have done. It's the carrot being dangled in front of the rest of the team. Be like, hey, if you ball out, you'll get taken care of.
Yeah, that's why I said it is, obviously the Jets have not been, the best decision-making team in the league, but I think this is in and of itself good business. The other big takeaway I have from this, as you see on the screen there in the highest paid corners, the Broncos deal to Patrick Surtain at $24 million a year, which technically hasn't even kicked in yet. It kicks in 2026 and goes through 2029. That's how long they have him signed.
Wow.
The reigning defensive player of the year. Looks like an absolute steal. And this goes back to one of my favorite things to discuss in terms of team building. Not discuss, but one thing that flies under the radar that we talk about when we talk about the Cowboys is the timing of the deals. They knew that, they saw, like everyone else did, the 2022 cornerback class that had, Stingley and Sauce Gardner. Where they go 2 and 4 overall in that year's draft. They were the, 2 of the 3 to 5 best corners in the NFL. They knew those deals were coming down the pike. So to beat them to market, to get $6 million now less than those guys who signed a year later,
that's some good players
like
every year.
Deal for the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, it all comes down to when these deals get done. And, it seems to me that the earlier you're getting these deals done and rewarding your players sooner, instead of waiting around for something to happen, you're going to get these good deals. I don't know if it's the exact same, and you can explain this to me, but when Patrick Mahomes signed, he took a heavy team-friendly deal. And he was locked up for a number of years there in that deal. This is kind of the same thing that PS2 is going to be in Denver. I mean, $6 million a year, that stacks over the course of 4 or 5 years, and you've got an additional set of reinforcements there on, on free money, essentially.
Mm-hmm. And there used to be, so I think just with like the inflation of the game, there used to be like, if you really got a steal of a contract, so like if you say you extended a guy and then he turned into a different player, and say it was like a decade ago, it would be you extended a guy who was $6 million a year. He turns to an insanely good player. He's underpaid by $5 to $10 million a year. Those guys would hold out. Those guys would get mad. When you're underpaying a guy, but he's still making $24 million a year. And I think this might be something that comes into play with quarterback contracts. And we kind of just saw it with Josh Allen, not really going out and getting what he could have.
We've reached fantasy land numbers.
Yes.
Like, where the guys are like, hey, whether it's 48 or let's just use whether it's 28 or 34, that's enough money to hire somebody that's smart in the stock market, or at least just throw your money in the S&P 500. We're all going to be billionaires in 30 years. So just take a breath, find a way to set your life up with a winning legacy. Be able to spread that money around. And guys like PS2, they took that deal, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally. The Broncos are going to have a significantly better team because of that deal. And you look around the league, to your point, some of these quarterbacks are taking less money now. And that, the margin there is huge. There's a lot of meat falling off the bone there for the rest of the locker room to pick up, which is fantastic for business and fantastic for the league.
Yeah, that's like I said, I think it's gotten to the point where there's just if you're haggling over $10 million when you're already making $500 million, it's like it's going to behoove you to have the elite guys, because they will almost be underpaid by definition, because it's crazy for them to even, those guys want to win more than they want that $10 extra million when they already have, like you said, monopoly money. So I think it's just an interesting thing to track going forward. And I think we've kind of hit that tipping point. I mean, the Mahomes deal was kind of starting to get there, but like we've really hit that tipping point here in the past few years with the cap ballooning now, into the $300 million range.
Hey, one contract I want to talk about really quick. I just want to give a tip of the cap. This is, one bull rider to another. Trey Smith, 4-year, $94 million deal with the Kansas City Chiefs. This is somebody that I thought was going to be a bear throughout free agency. Obviously, they franchised him. Correct me if I'm wrong. They franchised him, and then they got the deal done. Either way, he would have been making $25 million a year. I remember when the Chiefs drafted this guy in the mid rounds, and the only reason he fell from the University of Tennessee, late rounds, is because he had a heart condition. And when I tell you that I've never seen a man on a mission like Trey Smith, he showed up, him and his luchador hombre, Creed Humphrey, there at center, and those two have just balled out. It's been awesome to watch. I give a lot of credit to Trey Smith, but I give the equal amount of credit to the leaders in that locker room, the guys like Mahomes, but Andy Heck, the O-line coach. A lot of tough conversations. I saw the rookie year that Trey had in Kansas City, but, obviously he has just been a stalwart for them. Much earned, $94 million, 4 years. That's what it costs to be the best guard. That's what it pays to be the best guard in football. I mean, it's awesome.
He was a guy who was a freshman year starter at Tennessee at left tackle. I want to say it was like a 5-star. Like everyone knew early on he was a player.
Specimen.
But then he had blood clots. I believe they were in his lungs that not only, caused him to fall in the draft, but like he missed years in time at Tennessee and no one knew. And you mentioned like his work ethic and how much he put in. It's like when the game gets taken away from you at that age and you don't know how much time you have left playing, that makes you,
he's all
reevaluate.
Business and was like, a grown man from the time he showed up. It was there's a lot of rookies that show up, and any rookie that shows up on the Kansas City Chiefs doorstep, you got to think they're in football la la land. Trey was just like nails from the very beginning. I just want to tip my cap to him. $94 million, man. You earned it. You got to be so proud of yourself.
Well-deserved deal for him. All right. those are the contracts getting signed. Let's get to the coaching staff tiers right after this.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right. The first tier is titled Unproven and Worrisome. It includes the Tennessee Titans, where I'm not sure I need much of an explanation after the first year of the staff obviously gets the number 1 overall pick. Brian Callahan, your head coach. Nick Holtz, your OC. Denard Wilson, your DC. Not a lot of proven names there. Maybe not a lot of names you've even heard of in that unit. And obviously with the results last season, I'm worried after their year 1. Panthers, I'm throwing in this category as well. We have a first-time head coach in Dave Canales, last season. You have a first-time OC in Brad Idzik, who's John Idzik's son, former Jets GM, which funny story about this. I don't know if I told this on the pod at the time, but I'm flying from the Shrine Bowl to the Senior Bowl. So it's a flight from Dallas to Mobile. And obviously it's a direct flight, and it was the Monday of the Senior Bowl week. So like it's only NFL people on it. Yeah. I get down, I sit down, guy next to me is wearing a Sumer Sports hat. And he's like, I'm like, hey, how's it going? I know I have a buddy who works at Sumer Sports. I know company. What's your name? He's like, John. I'm like, Mike, Renner, whatever. End of the flight, I'm like, looking at him like, dude, I feel like I recognize this guy. He's like, yeah, I do some scouting for them because he's like old. Turns out it was John Idzik. Turns out it was the former Jets GM, and I just did not.
He was chill
at the time, but he was a good guy. Yeah, didn't.
People are very chill. Like airplanes. People think people go crazy. That guy's not real. People go crazy on airplanes all the time. I have some of the most chill experiences and interactions with people on airplanes. When things, when you finally sit down and the chime goes off, you've reached. There's nothing chiller than a conversation on an airplane. Nice to hear that a former GM was chilling.
So he's your OC, Ejiro Evero, your DC, but obviously with Panthers results last year, they make this tier. Next one. Dallas Cowboys, where I have not been shy of my criticism of Brian Schottenheimer and my feelings about him. Now their OC, Clayton Adams. Interesting choice here because he was an offensive line coach previously with Arizona the past 2 seasons. Rarity, but I think it's becoming less of a rarity nowadays.
Aaron Kromer did it.
Kromer, Stanovich is doing it with the Green Bay Packers. So I think it might just be a way of being like, hey, this guy's a great O-line coach. We need to.
Did Bill Callahan have any OCing? Was he OCing a little bit? Was he? You think he was shutting the door behind him, walking into the OC's room, like, "Hey, this is what we're doing."
I think he at one point did.
Okay,
but obviously got to be head coach also. Matt Eberflus, obviously the DC there, but they make this category for me. And then the last one is New Orleans Saints, where Kellen Moore is your head coach, Doug Nussmeier your OC, and then Brandon Staley your DC. Obviously his time in the Chargers and what he did there defensively. Not giving me much to be excited about at this point in time. So there's my tier of unproven yet worrisome.
Okay, so the Panthers, the astral ascent of Dave Canales, going from coaching like high school ball in Arizona, right? He was like he was running summer school and summer practice like 6 years ago. Now he's a head coach. He's had to deal with Bryce Young and the ups and downs of having a rookie quarterback who was doubted. Obviously, he did a great job with Baker Mayfield, but we've seen from Dave Canales that his teams can play hard. They just don't have enough talent. But when you don't have the talent, you better have a scheme all-star up front or something else out of your sleeve. So for the Panthers, I agree on the unproven worrisome, but I do think that the arrow is trending up for this team because of the talent influx there. For the Cowboys, as somebody who's a Nepo baby, I'm not going to sit here and talk shit about Brian Schottenheimer, but what I will say is, as a first-time head coach, everybody's going to be looking at you to see how you deal with certain situations. Situational football is one of the things that we cover the most during the season. But how do you deal with certain personalities in the locker room and all things of that sort? And as a first-time head coach, you're always supposed to have somebody that you can fall back on that has that head coaching experience. Luckily, they've got a guy who is a head coach. unfortunately for them, that guy is former Bears head coach.
Can I get to just the Nepo baby conversation? Because I think it's interesting because it's obviously become more commonplace in recent years because it's been like flooded, right? The NFL, you go any of these staffs, you will find a name whose father was a player, a coach, or whatever. It's just like it is commonplace. But I do think there is something to the niche nature of coaching. And maybe not as much going forward with the dispersion of just coaching information and playbooks, things that being able to find them online, being able to see scheme. But 20 years ago, 2005, growing up, if you were coming out of college then, coming out of high school then, and wanted to be a football coach, wanted to get into football, there was no resources to figure out what I'm trying to think of the best scheme, like what Mike Martz was doing with the Rams at that time, right? You could not go break down film if you were an outsider. You couldn't get these things. But if you were the son of a coach, chances are you were learning the ins and outs of coaching since you were like 8 to 10 years old. So there was a argument to be made that these guys were legitimately more qualified. Now, from just like the general public, if now you get the dispersion of information and everyone has access to this stuff, and basically anyone who's intelligent and talented and wants to learn about football can and get into the NFL. I think we're going to see and hopefully see that net widen. And I think with some of these young OCs that we're going to get to in time that like they're not Nepo babies. They've just been guys who prove themselves over and over again. But I do think it gets a bad rap in coach circles. There is obviously it is a who do you know, who are you friends with sort of league. That's how you get hired more often than not. But also it's like these guys probably had a higher floor to begin with. These guys probably were coming into these rooms. They were easy initial hires for a lot of teams because they knew more about coaching than your run-of-the-mill 23-year-old coming out of college.
I agree with you in large part about a number of things, but a few things I want to say. Mm-hmm. As a player, it's obvious that like
it doesn't matter.
There were things that I inherited from my dad that made life a little bit easier on the football field because of my explosiveness, twitchiness, whatever, my ability to see the game. As a coach, I would argue that the best coaches and oftentimes the best players are coaches' sons. But I think that it is to a point, though.
Yeah.
When your dad is an NFL coach, for the most part, you never see your dad. You never see your kids if you're coaching in the National Football League. Now, the benefit of the doubt that I'll give to Brian Schottenheimer is go take a look at how long he's been in the NFL, how long he has actually been in buildings, on staffs. It is very impressive.
28 years.
to hear that number. That stands out to me, and it allows me to rid myself of that nepotism conversation because obviously everybody has a certain degree of nepotism. You said it's a who do you know league. Former players looking to get hired as coaches, they're going to go with coaches that they played for. You know what I'm saying? There is that net. But I'll say this. I'm looking forward to the kids that had to innovate and didn't have somebody that taught them how to paint the picture, and they learned how to paint the picture themselves, because that's how you get these boy geniuses that show up on your doorstep and start whipping up the nasty, nasty stuff offensively.
That's what I'm saying is I think we are going to see a generation of that start to come into the NFL just because this is the first time. So say you graduate high school 2015, you could probably, at least in college and somewhat throughout your high school career, you could have like actually been looking up schemes. Hey, here's, I love what what Andy Reid's doing. I can go watch his offense. You have access to all 22 to watch.
We couldn't do that growing up.
Exactly. Like if I wanted, I remember like I was obsessed with draft prospects. All I would do is be able to, watch on Saturdays and then open up a magazine come spring. Like that's all I had at my disposal.
Yeah.
So, kids nowadays don't know how good they have it. If they really want to pursue something that they're interested in, you got all the information at your hands to go dive deep into. So I do think we'll see a lot of people coming from less traveled paths going forward, at least hopefully. But I kind of have a different take on Schottenheimer, not to keep on this point a little bit. But if you are the son of Marty Schottenheimer, obviously former NFL head coach, legend in his own right, and it takes you 28 years to get a head coaching job. You know, he's been at his stops now in the NFL. He's been with the Rams, the Chiefs, Redskins formerly, Chargers, Jets, Rams again, Colts, Seahawks, Jags, Cowboys now. So what was that? 9 stops?
Yep.
9 stops in the league. And like, if you truly were, you know, an innovative mind, if you truly were showing, the way Kyle Shanahan was, right? If you were
Those
that,
guys stick around when people get fired. Those guys stick around.
yes. So that's my only pushback and why I put him in this category. All right, let's get off.
I will say this though, Saints.
Trash people.
I like Kellen Moore a lot. Nussmeier, I like Nussmeier. I don't know if he's a great OC, but I'll say this about Brandon Staley: he is a much better DC than he is a head coach. And you'll find a number of these guys that are
worse DC.
What's that?
Hard to be a worse DC than he was.
Well, I got to see him as a position coach in Chicago, so I got to watch him work with outside linebackers every day and get that front seven together, and he was fantastic. I mean, that's the kind of guy that you want to play for. That's really all I can say about that staff. But Kellen, I mean, you get 2 players type coaches with Kellen Moore and with Brandon Staley. And obviously Nussmeier's a player's coach. He's got a kid who does it. Mm-hmm. It seems like a cool staff there. They're going to build something cool, and they got a lot of acreage to build. They don't have a lot of legs to stand on right now.
I will say this. I think a lot of his problems at head coach were a messaging problem, like that. If he's just a DC and just an X's nose guy, I do agree that maybe I'm being a little harsh on that. All right, let's go to the next tier here. It's called the unproven, but encouraging tier. So we really don't know. I think every single staff here that I put is either has no more than 2 years of experience in the league. So I didn't want to really go out and say, you know, they're for sure top of the market guys. Some of these I love. Like some of these staffs, I'm like, yeah, I think I'd put these among the top 10 staffs in the league if I just had to, but it really is too early to say for any of them. This includes the Arizona Cardinals, where I love Jonathan Gannon as a DC, or technically not the DC, but like what he does is play calling defense side of the ball. Drew Petzing, your OC, Nick Rawlis, your DC. I think they've overachieved each of the past 2 seasons. The Atlanta Falcons I put in this tier, where obviously Raheem Morris, what he did in his time in LA as DC, I thought I was very impressed with getting more out of less there. Zach Robinson as OC, I'm obviously a little biased there with his time at PFF, big buddy of mine, but the results when they had Michael Penix in there, I think speak for themselves. Ooh. And then Jeff Ulbrich at DC coming over from the Jets, where he was the interim head coach there.
He needs to defend his iPad.
All right, Texans are the next one here, where, you know, maybe you could even just like put them in one of these higher tiers because of the first 2 seasons. Miko Ryan's making the playoffs in both of them. But I do think I put him here because of Nick Caley, your OC, obviously had Bobby Slowick the past 2 years. He comes over from LA. Not sure what we're going to get from him. Matt Burke, your DC. I think it's a tremendous staff. Again, this is one of the ones where it's like, yeah, it's just like if you gave me this staff, I would probably say it's a top 10 staff if you had to make me rank them. But because of the way I'm doing these tiers, they go into this one. The Bears, Ben Johnson, you know, I can rave about him as a play caller, and I have over the past year and just over the past his tenure with the Lions, but we still don't really know how he's going to be as a head coach. Declan Doyle, we talked about these young guns coming up, 28 when he was hired. He was the tight end coach in Denver the last 2 years to be the OC. And then Dennis Allen, for as much as his head coach was kind of meh, he's always been a very solid defensive coordinator. So that's a very, very good staff. But just again, until we see it, this is the tier they go into. But the Seahawks in here, I love Clint Kubiak as an OC. I've made no bones about it. I think he very much overachieved when the Saints were healthy last year. That didn't last long, obviously, but when they did, that offense was explosive. Mike McDonald has kind of revolutionized defensive coordinator at the NFL level and how he coaches it. A lot of people are going to his defenses. He is kind of at the bleeding edge of that. And then obviously Aiden Durden, your DC, former Cowboys defensive line coach. Jaguars, I put in this tier. Liam Cohen, we raved about him like seemingly every single Monday last year. I'm very excited to see what he does with this Jaguars and it's all the talent they have at the playmaking positions offensively, as well as Trevor Lawrence. You got Grant Udinsky, another one of these young guns, 29 years old. He was the assistant offensive coordinator for the Vikings a year ago. That's not a bad offense. If you're going to poach an offense,
it's a lot of brain power in that room there.
Yeah. And then Anthony Campanelli, your DC, coming over from the Green Bay Packers. I mean, for the Jaguars and just where you thought they were and their ability to poach a staff and just the history of the Jaguars, I can't believe they got as good a staff as they did, truthfully. So
no offense to any other nationalities, but Italians, they do defensive coordinator just a little different than everybody else.
Vic Fangio, obviously chief amongst them.
Yeah, you got to get an Italian DC. Come on.
Jets are up next, where obviously just kind of took the Lions staff. Aaron Glenn, your head coach. Tanner Engstrand, your OC, comes over from Detroit. Steve Wilkes, obviously much traveled, former Arizona Cardinals head coach. Lasted 1 year, though. He's their DC. Colts make this tier. Again, another staff where you can maybe even just put them in the they're a little bit more proven than this. Your DC is Lou Anarumo. His track record outside of 2024 speaks for itself. Shane Steichen, your head coach. His obviously track record as OC speaks for itself. And then Jim Bob Cooter, all name team as your offensive coordinator. It's a very good staff. The Lions, I put in this tier. Obviously, Dan Campbell as a head coach. This isn't a head coaching staff ranking, right? This is a entire coaching staff ranking. And when you lose your OC and DC, and when they're as good as they were, we just don't know. Especially when your OC is a first-time OC, and John Morton, who was a passing game coordinator for the Broncos the past 2 years. And then your DC is one of the youngest DCs in the league, 37 years old. Kelvin Shepard literally played for the Lions in 2018. His last year in the league was involved in
still got a locker in the locker room, dude.
It was involved in one of the most lopsided trades of all time in retrospect. He was traded straight up for Jerry Hughes in 2013. Kelvin Shepard in 2014 was no longer on the Colts. Jerry Hughes, well, he just had double-digit sacks the next 2 seasons for the Buffalo Bills, became one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. So
I remember that.
There is your tier of unproven
problem,
yet very encouraging.
Okay, great job, by the way. And again, this is that, people were getting pissed because we put the Bears in the unknown category, offensively last 2 weeks ago or whatever it was. This is you're going to get some hate for this, but
academic honesty.
But I understand why these teams are all on here. Lions. I mean, you lost 2 All-Stars at the coordinator spot. You still have that great roster, but are you going to have that je ne sais quoi offensively? Are you going to be healthy enough? Is your coach on defense good enough to keep this defense, if it's ailing from a health standpoint, competitive? Colts, we talked about it. Italian DCs. Lou Anarumo, I've seen firsthand that this guy is a problem.
You need that vowel.
But he was also his group was a real problem last year too, and not in the cool way. So for the Colts, they need to figure out something. They got a lot of killers in that front seven. It'll free up Lou Anarumo on the back end. Shane Steichen we like, but I mean, unless you can get that spark plug working at the quarterback spot, it's tough to really get a judge of what the hell's going on. Tanner Engstrand has a unique job to do this year, and I'm excited to watch it happen because we know that Justin Fields is smart enough, athletic enough to run any type of offense. Let's see what Tanner thinks is the best thing for the Jets. For the Jags, we don't even have to talk about it. It's going to be a ton of fun to watch that group. Seahawks, it feels like they're going to smash people at the line of scrimmage between Clint Kubiak and Mike McDonald. Aiden Durd is British. I didn't know that.
Yes, he was born in
Middlesex,
England. Yeah.
Don't worry, I looked it up.
I think that's all the wave nowadays, right? Middlesex.
I like him. Yeah, that's right. That's good. He's ahead of his time. And then the Bears. Look, Dennis Allen is in a lot of eyes an upgrade from Matt Eberflus as the DC. But it goes back to that conversation that I had with Ben Johnson being a first-time head coach, being at the front of the room, offense, defense, and special teams, every man to a man, listening to one man. That's Ben Johnson's job. How's he going to do that, dude? Do you think he's going to be all right being a head coach?
That part. So I do think he is going to not be Dan Campbell in a number of ways. Like he is not going to be like the true leaders of men that you talk about around the NFL. He's not going to be that. Your Mike Vrabels, your Mike Tomlins, your Dan Campbell's, those guys who really have that. Andy Reid's even, who really have.
He could
that
be
complete
McVay.
command. I don't even know about McVay. I just don't think he has the dynamism of personality, the command in terms of verbally to get a room. But, there's other guys around the league. I don't think Matt LaFleur is that.
Or Shanahan.
Those guys. And I think he can be that, what they are to their respect.
Great.
Right. So if you're in that, and we'll see when we get to those guys' tier, there's some pretty high tiers, those head coaches and those staffs. So yeah, I'm not too worried about the Chicago Bears.
Is the foundational strength of Dennis Allen as the head coach in the building strong enough for Ben Johnson to stand on this season?
I thought that was a great hire. I thought it was, if you're going to hire Ben Johnson, obviously Declan Doyle, I think is a purely he hired Declan Doyle to be in a lab 24/7 trying to create new shit, so to speak. I think that's all that is. And then Dennis Allen is
he's like automation. You just put him to the side and let him
he's
like
AI. Like AI. There you go. He's a chat GPT. You're just putting in prompts and you let him go to work. Whereas Dennis Allen's like the guy who's kind of going to be more in the weeds, more hands-on. And I thought it was a great hire, just given how much he's been around the league, the positions he's been in, that kind of has some stability to bring to that staff when it truthfully with the head coach and OC could use it.
So last thing I'll say about Declan Doyle, tight end coach in Denver the last 2 years. One thing that's unique about people who play or coach the tight end position is that they live in both worlds, the line of scrimmage and the shell, the second level, because they have to deal with blocking combinations. They've got to deal with mic calls. They have to understand protections. So to have a guy like that in the lab as your AI, your automated play call or playmaker, it's really nice for the Bears. And he's young, so you can still mold that young sponge, whereas Dennis Allen, probably pretty stuck in his ways. Mm-hmm. The biggest swing staff is the Houston Texans. And here's why. We know that it didn't work last year with protection for CJ Stroud, and he had a monumental dip in performance. But you and I had points in which we said, hey, some of this could have been Bobby Slowick. We were not in those meeting rooms, but obviously the protection was the biggest reason. If Nick Caley can come in and find a way to right the ship and get the vibes right in that room, it's going to be huge. And a couple of things I found out about Nick Caley that stand out to me. Born in Canton, Ohio. Okay? Born in Canton, Ohio, where the greatest football players reside. So Ohio is like football, football, football. I love that from this guy. Also, he was a tight ends guy. He was a tight ends coach with the Rams, and he was there with Gronk when like 15 through 22. So he's got a number of Super Bowl rings. He's been around Tom Brady. He's been around big-time teams, big-time games, and I feel like that could be a real, gust of wind in the sails of a guy like CJ Stroud, who's in need of a pick-me-up. I'm not saying he's down in the dumps, but look, not playing well sucks in the NFL. And if you can get some help, great. And I think Nick Caley can be a big part of that. That's the biggest X factor out of this whole group.
All right, let me put you on the spot here before we get to the next tier. Of all these teams, and I'm going to take the Bears out of it because I don't want you to have any, which one would you take? Of all these staffs, which one would you take? You can't take it.
Man, oh man, oh man. Which staff would I take? And it's not the Bears. It's hard for me to pick between the Jaguars and what I've seen from, or schematically what I like from the Falcons. Yeah. I like the Jaguars and I like the Falcons because I like Raheem Morris. He seems like a guy who gets it and that players really probably gravitate towards. Zach Robinson is just like, you've raved about him forever. Jeff Ulbrich looks like a Marvel character. Anytime that you have a coach that looks the part, it really means something in our business because you don't just wake up looking the part. This guy has had to go day in, day out to get the look of Ulbrich, the beard, the muscles, everything. Okay. defense isn't that hard. You just need a guy out there who's just going to be jacked and get guys fired up. Offense is where it gets confusing. That's why I like Zach Robinson. And obviously from a leadership standpoint, I talked about Raheem Morris.
I'll lay one up for you. If I had to pick out all these, I would take the Bears. I'm not biased here. Unfortunately, I'm actually biased against the Bears, and that is the staff I would take. All right, next tier. It's called the Show Me Something tier. These are the teams that this is actually probably a worse tier than the one below it. I didn't really order these properly, but these are the ones where it's like, these aren't new staffs. These are staffs that have been around the block, but staffs that I want to see more from. They are the New York Giants. No explanation necessary here, where Brian Daboll is your head coach / OC. Shane Bowen, your DC, obviously came over from Tennessee. I don't even think an explanation is necessary there. Bengals is in the Show Me Something tier, where Zach Taylor is your head coach. Your OC is Dan Pitcher, who, crazily enough, was with the Bengals like in 2015, way before Zach Taylor even got there. Stayed on when Zach Taylor came, and now he's their OC. DC, Al Golden obviously comes over from Notre Dame. Probably the most exciting part of this Bengals staff right now at the moment. Miami Dolphins are in this tier as well.
Does he wear a tie this year?
I hope so.
Al Golden wears a necktie. That's what men do. Okay.
I love
that.
Miami Dolphins in this tier with Mike McDaniel. Obviously, like, if Mike McDaniel was just your OC, you're in good hands.
I like Frank Smith though.
As a head coach, is there are holes to poke in what he's done so far. Anthony Weaver, your DC, again, another team in the Show Me Something tier. And then lastly, it's a team that just extended their head coach, actually. But the Tampa Bay Bucks and Todd Bowles, I think, as much as they've kind of gotten credit for keeping this together post Super Bowl, a lot of that's been on Jason Light. I think Jason Light is a top 5 GM in the NFL. What he's done with this team, obviously Super Bowl winner, not only getting that, but like keeping it together post that. But I watched Todd Bowles in this defense, and I feel like they underperform their talent level consistently. And your OC is just unproven, and Josh Grizzard, who was passing game coordinator last year. Obviously, very smart guy. Went to Yale, has a master's degree from Duke.
Yes, he is.
But Dave Canales, Liam Cohen, the past 2 seasons kind of laid the foundation. Those were, the offenses were fantastic. We'll see how it goes with Grizzard, but Todd Bowles, truthfully, at the top needs to show me a little more, because I think this team has as much talent as anyone probably not named the Eagles in the NFC right now. And they need to play like it this year.
Dude, I'm going to start from the top here with the Giants. We've seen this movie so many times, bro. And I think they did just enough by getting Jackson Dart to be able to keep Brian Daboll around, because this young man's going to get some burn this year. At some point, Jackson Dart's going to get in there, and they're going to be like, well, we got to keep Daves because this is the guy we picked. The Bengals, look, everybody involved in the defensive game planning, the defensive performance last year should be thrown in jail, except for Trey Hendrickson. They should just give Trey Hendrickson the key and put him outside the jail. And when he deems them ready to go, he can let them out of jail. Let's hope that Al Golden can turn this thing around. I've known Al Golden for a very long time. I knew him when he was at the University of Virginia. Obviously, he ended up at Miami and then Notre Dame. He's been everywhere, but he's classic old school football guy. Hopefully, they'll be able to fix some of those self-inflicted wounds there on the defensive side of the ball. Dolphins, Mike McDaniel, what are we going to get out of Tua from a health standpoint? But there's nobody that puts Tua in this offense in better positions. I love what they do in the screen game. I love the explosion that they have from their players. If they can get something out of Tyreek Hill, it could be a lot of fun. Frank Smith, I had him as a tight ends coach in Chicago. Really, really, really brilliant guy, and somebody who has a ton of experience in the offensive line. So I feel like him as the OC is just an extension of the O-line coach, tight ends coach, and it's always good to have multiple voices. Weaver, you said, let's see some stuff. We need some health on the defensive side of the ball for the Miami Dolphins. The pass rushers got to stay healthy in order for any of this thing to work. And for the Bucks, I love Todd Bowles. Glad he got the extension. It is impressive that they're competitive every year. But to your point, they're playing below their talent level defensively. If they can shore things up on that side of the ball, the Bucks could be right there at the top of the conversation as we approach meaningful football time this year.
Yeah, that's why I kind of put them in this tier. It's not that you're screwed with these staffs. It's just that they've been a little up and down. And when you rank them and look at some of the others around the league, you're just, I feel myself continuously, just comparing them to what we'll see in the next tier. I'm probably taking every other staff in the next tier above what's in this tier. So because of that, we'll get to those tiers right after this.
I wasn't ready to die.
The wait is over.
I need to know what happened.
Discover the mystery everyone's been talking about. School Spirits. Every episode of all seasons now streaming on Paramount+.
All right, this next tier is called the Unspectacularly Solid tier. This is, I don't want it to get it twisted. These are good staffs. I just, compared to the next tier, they are not at the forefront of schematic innovation, shall we say, for the most part. There are some teams have one guy maybe that's very good, another that maybe leaves a little bit to be desired. We'll explain it when we get to them. And the first one, I'm leaving myself open here, is called, in the Unspectacularly Solid tier, is the Philadelphia Eagles, which they've not been happy with me for how I ranked their quarterback position, even though I think I put every other positional group on their roster in like the A or the S tier. Unfortunately, did not put Jalen Hurts in the A or the S tier. And I'm not putting their coaching staff in the A or the S tier either. Where Nick Sirianni is your head coach, Kevin Petula is your OC now, after obviously they've ran through 3 different OCs the past 3 years. He comes over as the passing game coordinator from the past 4 years, which if you've watched their passing game, at least last year, isn't something I'd hang my hat on as an OC. And then your DC, Vic Fangio, obviously he is one of the GOATs, a tremendous defensive coordinator. So maybe I'm being a little harsh putting him there.
You are, because you know what? This is all about Petula, isn't it? You just have a Petula issue.
Oh, and Sirianni.
Why do you have a Sirianni issue? Sirianni's 48-20 in the regular season. He's got a 706 winning percentage. It places him third highest winning percentage by a head coach in the Super Bowl era, only behind John Madden and John Madden. AI didn't help me out with the second name. Postseason, though, 6 wins, 3 losses. Look, all I'm saying is Nick Sirianni, as annoying as he is, you got to give him his flowers. And you just said Fangio is one of the best to ever do it. So I'll be right here waiting outside with my Philly cheese, ready to talk some shit to you, Renner, as many Philadelphians will.
I feel like the crux here is just how talented I see this roster as.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, they've won a lot of games. They've had the best roster in the NFL for like 4 years running. Like their offensive line has been, the offensive line's been a top 3 unit for his entire career. His wide receiving core has been a top 3 unit. His, defensive line's been a top 3 unit. You have top 3 units at O-line, wide receiver, D-line. You should be the 1 seed every single season. If you gave Andy Reid what he has, right? If you gave Kyle Shanahan what he has, if you give the true guys who I put in the S tier of coaches,
they would never lose games.
Staff, they go 15-2, 14-3 every single year. It's just, that is how I see it. And so again, this is not a bad tier to be in. We'll see some of the company he's in, and it's good company. It's just, that's how I see the Eagles at this point in time. So let's get to the other ones, and then we can circle back to Neeby. Next one on this list is the Steelers, where Mike Tomlin, again, I don't think anyone's debating he's a fantastic coach, but I don't see anything they do offensively and defensively being, again, at the bleeding edge of schematic innovation that you kind of need to be amongst the best in the NFL right now. Obviously Arthur Smith, your OC, Terrell Austin, your DC, but like, that's just, I think, where the Pittsburgh Steelers lie. I put the New England Patriots in this mix with Mike Vrabel as head coach, Josh McDaniel at OC, DC Terrell Williams. I put the Las Vegas Raiders in here, Pete Carroll at head coach. Now, Chip Kelly is another one like Vic Fangio where it's a wild card. He is and can be, and I think should be, at the top end of the offensive coordinators around the NFL, but we really don't know after his time in college. So that's one where I put him here, but doesn't quite fit the bill of the tier name. And then Patrick Graham at DC. And then lastly on this, Cleveland Browns, where your head coach is Kevin Stefanski, OC Tommy Rees, and DC Jim Schwartz. Let me hear it.
Tommy Rees.
Domer.
Go Tommy Rees.
I remember saying his, so I was 1-0 as OC at Notre Dame. I was on like a Notre Dame podcast. I was like, dude, I'm so glad he's not the OC at Notre Dame anymore because they didn't actually have a good offense that year. I was like, he is OCing and calling plays like he wants to be an NFL offense coordinator. He was not like doing the easy stuff that you can just do.
He was doing his young men a disservice.
Yes. So,
well, maybe he was doing himself a service, and maybe it'll strengthen my argument that possibly the Browns belong on a different tier. But, look, I'm not from Cleveland. I don't have real estate on Lake Erie. I love Kevin Stefanski. He has been living in a hellhole shitbox as a head coach because of the situations that they've got into contractually, legally, all sort. Look, I'll tell you how much I love Jim Schwartz as a DC. I can't stand Jim Schwartz. I hate Jim Schwartz's defenses. I hate the guys that are coached by him. I hate playing them. I hate everything about Jim Schwartz, which makes me feel very good about having a good time watching the Cleveland Browns play football again this year. Look, you never have questions about his defenses. The Raiders, Chip Kelly is going to be a wild card. You said it. But, how much better is the defense going to be because they're healthy at some very important spots? Mm-hmm. Patrick Graham's got his work cut out if they are healthy or if they're not healthy. Look, Chip Kelly, this thing's in the bag for Chip Kelly. He's got a quarterback who can distribute the football. He's got a running back he can lean on down in, down out with Genty. He's got the 2 tight ends. Take a look back historically at all the successful offenses, most of them, 98% of them that Chip's ever been in. People look at the quarterbacks and it's like, oh, they're playing point guard. No. Take a look at the running back and the offensive line in all those units because they dominate the line of scrimmage. They pound people into submission, and then they spread the field out. Looking forward to seeing them doing that for the Raiders. You hit the nail on the head for the Steelers. I don't need to say anything. And then obviously Josh McDaniels and Vrabel. That's going to be fun. McDaniels, Patriots. Come on. There's nothing more synonymous with Patriots than Josh McDaniels.
And Terrell Williams is a heck of a defensive line coach. Wherever he's gone, he has had D-lines outperform. And obviously he was D-line coach with the Lions last year, D-line coach with the Titans under Vrabel. So I may be underrating that staff a little bit, but that's how I see them. Let's get to the next tier, and then we can maybe compare afterwards. Where I think I call this on the bleeding edge tier. It's staffs that I think are doing the things you have to do offensively, defensively to win championships in the NFL. They just haven't quite gotten to that level where they're almost the untouchable level that we'll see when we get to it. It's the Buffalo Bills, where Sean McDermott has done more with less defensively than his track record of doing so is as good as it gets in the league right now. And then Joe Brady, obviously, your former LSU OC, former I believe it's Panthers OC at one point, now the OC of the Buffalo Bills. I think what he does offensively, again, it is up there in the tiers of your sharp offensive minds around the league. Denver Broncos in this tier with Sean Payton, and then Vance Joseph at DC, who had one of the league's best defenses, is doing a lot, is right amongst the wave of those new age defenses that are giving offenses so much to deal with at the line of scrimmage, so many different looks. That staff speaks for itself. And again, they were probably the closest of all these teams
to being in the next one.
In the next tier. Green Bay Packers, Matt LaFleur, your head coach, Adam Stenovich at OC, and then Jeff Hafley, who had a top 10 defense last year in his first year as defensive coordinator. Not a lot to say about them. It speaks for itself. Los Angeles Chargers with Jim Harbaugh, Jesse Minter, Greg Roman kind of being the elephant in the room here. I call this the on the bleeding edge tier. I don't think anything Greg Harbaugh does is quite on the bleeding edge.
Greg Roman.
Yeah, but it's distinctly Greg Roman. It is unique amongst the NFL and what they do. But Jesse Minter and Harbaugh carry this to this tier quite easily. Those two guys, as good as it gets to their positions. And then the Washington Commanders with Dan Quinn at head coach, Cliff Kingsbury at OC, Joe Witt Jr. your DC, but obviously Dan Quinn responsible for the defensive side of the ball. The results speak for itself. First year going to the NFC Championship game. That's it. That's the end of this tier.
Cliff Kingsbury, how much more creative can your offense get? We've seen him have success numbers of times in college, in the NFL. He's probably going to be a head coach soon, so we're going to get to see his montage, his highlight tape this year. We're going to see a lot of cool stuff from Jaden Daniels and that offense. Obviously, Dan Quinn, we love. You know what you're going to get when you play against the Chargers. I like this staff because it just feels no bullshit. It's player-led.
Yeah.
And the one non-player, Greg Roman, is inflicting pain upon the defensive line. So he's a player by default in that scenario. I love the Packers staff. And, one guy that's not on the list here is special teams coach Rich Bisaccia, who is highly respected and experienced. Matt LaFleur, you talked about, he's one of the most underrated offensive minds, head coaches in the National Football League. He's not explosive with personality. He's under the radar. They play well. Hafley's defense has been really good, and they got even better this offseason. The Broncos is the group that I think could be in the next one. You already said that, though. I love Sean Payton, his staff. Joe Brady feels like he just brings some sort of confidence juicing and puts it on to Josh Allen every week. Like when I was at my best, when I was at my best in the NFL, Aaron Kromer was my offensive line coach, and he didn't give me any coaching advice. He would just say, "Go be a freak, go let your freak flag fly." I feel like that's kind of the similar situation that Joe Brady has with Josh Allen every week. And it must be nice to be able to have your caddy just hand you driver and say, "Swing away, big dog." You know what I'm saying? I love this on the bleeding edge tier here.
All right. We actually didn't do it for the last one, but I'm going to put you on. So for each of the last two tiers, so unspectacularly solid and on the bleeding edge, give me one from each. If you had to pick one from each, which staff would you pick?
I would go with the Eagles because I love Vic Fangio and Nick Sirianni's a winner. And I would go on the bleeding edge. I would go with Sean Payton's Denver Broncos.
Okay. I think for the unspectacularly solid, give me the Raiders staff. Pete Carroll, I think he's incredible. And it's just like a fun head coach as well to have. And I think Chip Kelly, of those OCs in that tier, whereas Tommy Rees, Josh McDaniels, Arthur Smith, Kevin Petula, he's the one by far and away I would want of those guys. So give me that. And then on the bleeding edge, just give me the Chargers. I love Jim Harbaugh. As I think he is, if you're just head coaches, he's not lower than 3 for me. I think he is a spectacular head coach, spectacular leader of men. And then just like his teams always overperform at the NFL level. They just always have. All right. As good as it gets here. No, not breaking any ground here. Kansas City Chiefs lead it off. Andy Reid, Matt Nagy, Steve Spagnuolo. 3
head coaches, 2 of which who have been coach of the years, head coach of the years.
So it's a staff. Los Angeles Rams, Sean McVay, Mike LaFleur's your OC, Chris Shula your DC, and obviously Shula had some great results last year. Minnesota Vikings, head coach Kevin O'Connell, OC's Wes Phillips, but obviously Kevin O'Connell more of your play caller there. Brian Flores your DC. San Francisco 49ers, Kyle Shanahan. I mean, you don't even need the OC DC, but Clay Kubiak is your OC. It's like Clint Kubiak's brother. Gary Kubiak's son, and then Robert Saleh is your DC, and then Baltimore Ravens is the last.
He's back with his buddy. Saleh's with his buddy.
Yeah, back where he began. And then Baltimore Ravens, Jim Harbaugh at head coach, Todd Monken at OC, and then Zachary Orr at DC. Anyone you would flip. So you said the Broncos is the staff you would say is the closest to as good as it gets. Anyone from this that you would have the Broncos above?
No.
Yeah, I think this is the tier. I think the most debatable is maybe the Ravens.
Yeah.
But you have a Super Bowl winning head coach.
Because now I'm starting to look at these teams. I'm thinking about rosters too. And, it's just like if you can hand people, you can hand a kid a Ferrari. he's not going to know how to drive it. But like if you hand one of these good coaches a Ferrari, they at the very least are not going to mess it up. And when I think about with what Todd Monken gets to tinker with every week, that's awesome. Guys like Jim Harbaugh, who have done it for so long at the head coach spot, nothing phases them. Same thing with Jim Harbaugh, or with John Harbaugh, rather. Sorry, it's these guys have been around so long as head coaches. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, and also you got great players, so just go let them play. It's the same thing we talked about with the Eagles, man. Like so many good players, the spoils are crazy.
The one, obviously, the least experienced staff of this bunch, Minnesota Vikings. Kevin O'Connell, only a 3-year head coach, but in those 3 seasons, he has a 13-win season and a 14-win season.
Come on.
He did it with a middle-aged Kirk Cousins and a journeyman Sam Darnold. And then Brian Flores, amongst, if you're ranking DCs around the NFL, he's no worse than 5. He's probably higher than that, truthfully.
Yeah.
So you have a staff that is, like I said, as good as it gets on both sides of the football. That's what it takes to be in this tier. And that's why the tier is only 5 teams deep. There you have it. There's your head coaching tiers.
Tier it
Let
up.
us know where I got wrong. We will be back next week, though. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, keep pushing.
Peace.